So why don't we do this? Instead of talking about prophet, P-R-O-F-I-T, and the prophetic, P-H-E-T, let's talk about being prophetic for profit. Why do we have to have either or? Why don't we have both and? Because I'm going to tell you this. I'm being promoted because of the prophetic gift inside of me. Do you know that the world is hungry for a genuine word from the Lord? They just have to get past, we have to get past as a church, putting it in our Christianese freaky language. Does that make sense? The world is hungry for heavenly wisdom. We have an unfair advantage because we have the Spirit of the living God within us, and the world is hungry for it. Does that make sense? So why don't we talk about both and today? Would that be all right? Because this is what I believe. Why here? Why now? Why am I standing here? I'm a realtor. You know, I used to travel with Ray. Yeah, I got one. I see that hand. God bless you. I used to travel with Randy Clark around the world and pray for the sick and see lots of people saved, lots of people healed. And now I run a Keller Williams office. I own a few Keller Williams office, and I'm in. I've just had, God has just been really. It's been remarkable the favor that's been on my life. Right. I believe, as I came here today, and as the week ahead, I texted Mark saying that I really believe God's given me a word for this place because I believe that every day, I don't know if you realize, I was standing there in worship just realizing what an amazingly special thing that you have going on here is. And I don't say that because I want an invitation back. I'm not here because of the big love offering or honorarium. It's not about that at all, right? In fact, just give it away to somebody else. If you guys had planned on a check, just find somebody, just sow that into their lives. I don't want it. Yeah, positive. Okay, why don't you give it to Danielle, because she needs it more than I do. So anyway, then maybe she won't ask me for money. So I guess that was self-serving, wasn't it? The reason, though, that I am here is because I really believe this place is pregnant with promise. I believe that in this room, some of you have dreams, and some of you have words from the Lord that have yet to be fulfilled, and you're in the season of divine frustration. Does that make sense? God said this, and this is happening. God has prophesied wealth to you, and he's prophesied favor to you, and then all of a sudden you turn around, you're broke, and nobody likes you. Is that right? That God's promised you to be a father, and then everybody rejects you. God's promised you that you would grow a huge lighthouse on the central coast of California. And I remember when I was pastoring, when the prophetic moved into our church, our seeker-sensitive church, I felt like Moses. Let my people go, and out the door they went. I mean, they left in droves, right? I am here because I want to make sure that it's with real great clarity, that we understand that between the prophetic promise and the palace is a divine process. And when we master the process, it prepares us for the palace. Does that make sense? And what God is doing, here's what the really great thing with God is you never fail a test with him. You just get to retake it over and over until you pass it. Because here's the thing, is the weight of the promise on some of your lives is so huge and so enormous that if the fulfillment of that promise were to happen right now, it would crush you. And out of the tender, loving kindness of God, he's allowing you to go through a process in which it strengthens you to be able to handle the weight of that promotion. So today I'd like to talk to you about the process to promotion. Would that be okay? Because I really believe that some of you are pregnant with promise, and you've been pregnant for like 18 years. And I don't know any ladies in here, if you were pregnant for 18 years, wouldn't there become a point where it's like, oh, Lord, get this baby out? I think some of you really are there, that God has given you promises, and he's waiting for you to agree with him and partner with him and join into the process to gain the strength of it. How many of you have like enormous dreams that you're aware of? How many of you have had some prophetic voice come in and prophesy something over you, and you're waiting for it to take place the next day, and the next day happened, and it didn't happen? Let me see your hands. Right. And how many of you, don't raise your hands on this one because we don't want to show how unspiritual we could be at times, but how many of you said, false prophet? Man, he missed that one. Or how many of you seen somebody else prophesied over as like, oh, wow, if you only knew what that person really was made of. I want to tell you the truth here, that God has not forgotten any of his promises over your life, no matter where you are. So I want to go to a very familiar biblical story and give you some principles from that, and then I want to pray, because I believe today is the birthing of some promises. Is that okay? This really is the conviction this morning when I woke up, that some of you are walked into this room in one way, and you're going to leave completely different. Is that okay? I really just sense that there's a weariness, and there's been a toiling, and there's been a laboring, and there's been a striving, and it's almost like you're running in quicksand just a little bit. And I really believe today is the day of freedom from that, where the tethers come off the feet and where you guys start running with your dreams. Is that okay? Would you receive that? Okay, so take your Bibles to Genesis chapter 37 if you have them. I want to read just a few passages out of the story of Joseph. Joseph is probably the story in the scriptures that I right now connect. I find my story inside the story an awful lot, right? And I love this because I remember years ago somebody prophesied that I'd be a millionaire, and I was pastoring making about $50,000 a year. And how does somebody who's pastoring making $50,000 a year and feeling guilty for making that much money, how does that person become a millionaire? I never saw that, right? And sometimes God has to, Jehovah Sneaky happens sometimes. And sometimes God pushes you out of your comfort so that he can propel you into your destiny. And that's what God has me. So I'm praying today, I'm praying that you walk in here so encouraged that you cannot walk on ground anymore. Is that okay? All right. Just really sense that in my spirit. Say, Genesis chapter 37, verse 5, we'll read there down through verse 11. It says, "Now Joseph had a dream, and he told it to his brothers," mistake number one, "and they hated him even more. So he said to them, 'Please hear this dream which I have dreamed. There we were, binding sheaves in the field. There, and behold, my sheaf rose and stood upright. And indeed your sheaves also stood around and bowed down to my sheaf.' And his brother said to him, 'Shall you indeed reign over us? Or shall you indeed have dominion over us?' So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. Now, if that wasn't bad enough, he dreamed another dream and told it to his brothers again." This is where we would call it, this is a punk with a promise. He didn't know how to steward the promise. Can I ask you a question? If you have a dream and you tell it to somebody and it's not received and they hate you, do you think it's wisdom to go back and tell them a second dream that you have? Now, let me ask you this. If Joseph had been in the palace where he had all power, unquestioned authority, do you think he could have handled it right in this moment? No. Think about it. A punk with a promise and power to do anything, and nobody questions it, because he's eventually going to end up in a palace where he's number 2 to the superpower king of the world. And nobody's going to question his authority. Nobody's going to question his decisions. Nobody's going to question anything. You put this guy in that palace, what would have happened to Joseph? See, here's the truth, is some of your palaces are waiting for you to be prepared so you can handle the weight of the palace. Joseph at this place wasn't prepared for it. So he had another dream, told it to his brothers, said, "Look, I've dreamed yet another dream. This time the sun and the moon and the 11 stars bowed down to me." So he told it to his father and his brothers, and his father rebuked him and said to him, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall your mother and I and your brothers indeed come down to bow down to the earth before you?" And his brothers envied him, but his father kept the matter in mind. This is what I found out in the church, especially the churches that are open to the voice of God and hearing the prophetic word. We love the prophetic. How many of you have had a prophetic encounter that, it was real, the boogies were flowing. When the boogies flow that it's real. It's just crying, it's the ugly cry, it's just, and guys do the ugly cry just like ladies do, and it's real, and it's just, oh my goodness, I love that. How many of you, like me, just love those moments, right? How many of you love the fulfillment of the promise? It's just like, wow, I got promotion. Wow, all of a sudden, the suddenly of God happened, and everything completely changed in a moment, right? Here's what I'm going to encourage you to do. Fall in love with the process. Fall in love with the process. Because here's what life is. We love the event, the prophetic word, and then it's process. And then it's event, and then it's process. And then it's event, then it's process. Then it's event, then it's process. Then it's event. Where's most of life lived? In the events or in the process? So wouldn't it be great if the joy of the Lord is going to be our strength for us to love the process? Because that's where life is lived. Life is lived in the fact that we have to take out the trash once a week. Life is lived in the fact that we have to wash dishes and take care of the bills and take care of the dogs and take care of the kids. Life is lived in the process. It's not lived in the mountaintops, it's lived in the valleys. So let's learn how to excel in the valleys. Wherever I go, listen, this is the day that the Lord's made. I'm going to rejoice in it, my now. I'm not going to get this now moment ever again. So let's learn how to excel in our now. Does that make sense? So what happens between the promise and the palace is a process that prepares us for promotion. So this is what the process looked like for Joseph, and I totally it relates to this. He goes out to his field one day, he gets this coat of many colors, he gets the Prada of clothes, he's wearing his Louis Vuitton, and he goes out to it, right? Did I get that right, Danielle? Okay, right. That's why the love offering has to go to her. That's her taste, and so she's got the taste of a princess. so he goes out and he sees his brothers, and they say, now's our chance. The first step for Joseph to prepare for the palace was the pit. His brothers say, let's throw him into a pit and come back later and kill him. I mean, this is, some people in America like to watch the Jerry Springer show. I'm going to guess that this family could have made that show. This is dysfunction at its highest level. We're going to kill him, throw him in a pit, kill him. And as an act of mercy, one of his brothers comes back and says, why kill him? Let's make some money off of him. So they sell him into slavery. Here's what Joseph, and every step of the way, Joseph has an opportunity to be prepared for the palace, because see, this is what happens in the pit. In the pit, when you realize you are dead. In the pit, you realize that your life no longer could go on the same. In the pit, you realize you're not daddy's pampered boy anymore. In the pit, you die to everything, and guess what? When you die to everything, you're free to everything. Let me ask you this. How do you offend a dead man? Anybody go to a funeral? I don't want to be disrespectful or anything. Go to a funeral sometime and hurl insults at the person in the casket. Do they care? They don't care. You can't reject a dead man. In the pit, we learn to die. Because when we die, guess what? We can fly. When we die, see, in the pit, we learn that rejection and abandonment, while hurting us, frees us. Because this is what I found out. You cannot operate under high levels of favor with men if you have the fear of man. In the pit, you lose the fear of man so you can handle the favor of men. Listen, I know that I am still not free when I feel rejected. I know I'm still not quite yet free when I'm abandoned. Listen, God gives me promises, and listen, there are times in my life where I have been rejected, where I have been abandoned, where nobody picks up the telephone, nobody returns a phone call. Anybody in this room been there? Where it's like everywhere you turn around, and the pain of that is just awful. Does that make sense? It's in that moment that God is inviting, and God was inviting Joseph to come to a place of freedom from the fear of man, because this is the truth. When you come to the palace, you can't need people and lead people at the same time. The church has to learn this this is a big principle the church must learn. We need to move out of dependency and codependency and learn what it means to be genuinely interdependent. You're powerful, I'm powerful, and we choose to be together, not because we need each other, but because we choose to be together because we're more powerful together than apart. That is what God does in the pit of rejection. That is what God does in the pit of abandonment. That's what God does in the pit of betrayal. And instead of talking about how bad your life is, look for the opportunity to get free. Instead of talking about how terrible those people were, hey, can I just declare this over some of you? Because I kind of feel the resistance here just a little bit. There is a divine reason why people in your past did not make it into your future. There is a reason why people in your history don't make it to your destiny, because they would be boat anchors. They would hold you down. They would not propel you to where you need to go. So all those people that you think of, yeah, that dirty, rotten scoundrel, these brothers were actually doing something in the favor of Joseph. They were getting him a free trip to Egypt. It doesn't lessen the pain. It doesn't hurt any less. What I'm saying, it's an opportunity to let your heart get evangelized. So I am powerful with you. I am powerful without you. And here's the deal. I'll do it with you. I'll do it around you, but I'm going to do it. That's what a leader says. Is that right? That's what the pit does. It prepares us for the palace by allowing us to be free from the fear of man. I'm going to tell you, the church is being invited by God right now to get completely free. And you know how God does that? By allowing people to reject you. And instead of going around becoming a victim to that and starting to listen to country western music incessantly, let that stumbling block be a stepping stone to your promotion. So one day you could look those people in the face with absolutely no malice in your heart and say, listen, you meant it for evil, God meant it for good, we're all good now. You know when we know Joseph really passed his test? wasn't once he got into the place of power. It's when his brother stood before him. You know you passed your test when you could forgive somebody. You know you've passed your test when I want to bless you even though you meant to hurt me. Does that make sense? Guys, that lesson in my life has been learned through the hard knocks of life. Because here's the deal. Bitterness and anger is drinking poison thinking it's going to hurt somebody else. I believe that some of you in the process to get the fulfillment of your promotion, this is the issue for you, is releasing the people of your past. And really realizing that their rejection and abandonment, though it may have been malicious, actually is accelerant to you getting to your destiny. And there'll be a day, I want to prophesy this over you, that you genuinely be grateful for the rejection and abandonment of those people who should have known better. In fact, can I just tell you this? This will be the revenge of God. This will be God taking revenge on what the enemy did. He took sinful acts, rejection of people, abandonment, them acting out of their weakness, and he used it to propel you to your future. Yeah? That was amazing, Lucas. Thank you. Okay. The second thing, so he goes to the pit, and then he gets this free trip to Egypt, one-way ticket to Egypt. Doesn't have to pay for it, doesn't have to do anything, goes there, and now he goes from the pit to being property. He gets sold into slavery. How many of you know that one of the darkest moments in American history is when we adopted and embraced the idea of slavery, that another human being, you know what I've been really impressed with this time, and I don't know who they are, but I'm hearing a lot, this particular trip, I've never heard it before every day, of people who are involved in freeing women from sex trafficking. That is just remarkable. I want to sow into that, so I want more information about that, because here's the deal, is God designed us to be free. We're not designed to be anybody else's property. So this is not a stamping endorsement of slavery. However, Joseph, to prepare for the palace, has to become property because there is a beauty in becoming property, and here's the beauty. You realize that your life is no longer your own. You've been bought with a price. Does that sound familiar to anyone? I am not my own. I've been bought with a price. I've been purchased. Somebody put a price tag over my head and paid the price, because you see, Jesus, when he said, "It is finished" on the cross, he paid the price for you. He paid the price to redeem you, and now my life is no longer my own. It belongs to him. I serve at the pleasure of the King of all kings. I serve at the pleasure of the Lord of all lords. And when you are just property, guess what? You don't have the right to talk back. You don't have the right to an opinion. You have the right just to do what you're told to do. And here's the deal. Who was the witness to the very first miracle Jesus ever did? You would think, if I'm God, which I'm not, aren't you thankful? If I was God, though, I'd play this out. I'd like to do this really big thing with neon lights, Vegas type of show, and Jesus does a miracle. Bring all the dignitaries, world powers into the room. You know who it was? It was servants. What were their names? We don't know. So it's a bunch of nameless, faceless people who were working at a wedding, and they run out of wine, and I can imagine the snickers amongst the service. Like, somebody's got to lose their job. Somebody messed up in a big way. And so they get this mother, brings her son in, and she's obviously really proud of him and thinks he's all that. And he says, "Hey, listen, whatever he says to do, just do it." Like, what are they going to say? Like, no, I'm not going to do that. No, they're servants. They don't have a right to voice back. Says, "Fill up those pots with water." Okay, dude, you're a carpenter. You're not much on the wine, but okay. They fill up the pots with water. He says, "Take that water, go to the headmaster." They're like, "Oh, dude, you want me to lose my job?" They're serious. They're stressing out. They're freaking out because we ran out of wine. You want me to take this water to him? They don't have a right to talk back. Dip a cup in the water, take it to the headmaster. The headmaster says, "Go get your boss." They're like, "Oh, we're toast now. We're going to get beat." And then they hear him say to the boss, most people take the best wine and save it for, do it at the beginning and save the cheap stuff for the end when everybody's drunk. You save the best wine for the last. It's like, what just happened? The headmaster didn't know. The boss didn't know. The first people that knew about water turning into wine were nameless, faceless servants. Listen, the more we understand that my life is not my own, I serve at the pleasure of the King of all kings, I get to see the miraculous in my life. It's when my agenda gets on the center throne. It's when my selfish ambition becomes forefront that I start to see no miracles in my life. Does this make sense? That when you become property, you set yourself up divinely to see the supernatural work in your life because it's not about you. My goodness, how many times have we made it about us? We pray for the sick, they don't get healed. We go away feeling depressed about our lack of anointing, not about the fact that they're still sick. The higher up you go in authority, the higher up you go in influence, guess what? You find out it's not about you anymore. I'm the CEO of Keller Williams Realty Partners in Overland Park. We have 437 agents. I am the operating principal of the Northland office. It's the fastest growing office in Kansas City. It won #1 recruiting office in the entire world. I'm the OP of that. We've got 335 agents. I just bought another Keller Williams with 235 agents. There's over 1,000 agents that if I decide on a Saturday night to go downtown Kansas City, get liquored up, and get into a fight and end up on the front pages of the Kansas City Star, guess what? I've embarrassed over 1,000 agents. It's not about me anymore. Do you get this? The higher in leadership you go, the less it has to do with you. And when it's all about you, you've just limited yourself down to here. Let's bust that ceiling off. When you're nothing but property, guess what? It's not about you anymore. It's not about you. And I wonder, even at this time, if Joseph was a little hurt. Because as a slave, what happens? God's favor is on him, right? He starts to rise. And I wonder if he ever was tempted to think, is this the fulfillment of my promise? Is this the best it's going to get? I'm just going to be the prince of slaves. I'm going to be the top of slaves. I'm going to be the king of slaves. I'm going to be over Potiphar's entire house. See, I think sometimes in the process, we think that we right now are living in the complete fulfillment of God's promise in our lives. And here's what the deal is. God plays chess on about 12 levels at the same time. He's got something so much bigger. Do you know I have found where the limitations are for all of our progress in life? Geographical center of it. Do you want me to help you with that? Everybody, just free your hands up and do your hands like a basketball. Yeah, like you're holding a basketball. This is called prophetic activation. No, it's not. Do your hands. Now, I want you to put it on either side of your head. Everything between your hands is the issue. We just located it. We just found it. It's your capacity to argue with God. It's your capacity to have an opinion of what you think should be and should not be. It's you thinking, if I were God, I'd do it this way. When God gives you a promise, he's got a process in mind to get you to the place. Listen, many of you are in the pit right now. Many of you are feeling like you're just a piece of property. You don't have an opinion. Many of you feel like you're a slave to somebody else's vision. And many of you feel like, I work for a boss who is a heathen and who's ungodly. How can I possibly serve for him? Hey, ask Joseph that question. We are limited by our capacity to think. And many of you are saying, God, get me out of this. And God's saying to you, man, I worked 1,000 details out to get you in the middle of this. I've placed you right where you are so you could learn the strength it takes to handle the palace. Because there's nothing worse than having somebody in leadership who has the fear of man. There is nothing worse than having a paranoid leader. There is nothing worse than having somebody who makes the agenda about themselves. You know, the organizational chart, here's me, and then here's everybody else. We want to talk business, is that okay? Here's me, and here's everybody else. And then they said, we're going to do reorganization. So here's me, and here's everybody else. Listen, the more you grow up in leadership, the more it's about serving everybody else's needs. You get to learn that when you learn to be a servant. Some of you may be in the process where you're trying to get, where God is inviting you to the wonderful reality of you getting out of your own way. Well, I think this. Yeah, that's the problem. Well, I think this. Well, yeah, I get that. How many of you have an opinion that you know is wrong? None of you. You wouldn't have an opinion that knowingly you knew was wrong, erroneous, a fallacy. Every one of you have an opinion and you think it's absolutely right. I wonder what God's opinion is of your life right now. I wonder what God's opinion was of his life when he was being a slave. and prospering him in there. He learns how to be a slave. He learns how to excel in his now. He learns how to excel with authority. He learns how to steward what he has right then. And guess what happens? He grows in favor so much so that Mrs. Potiphar gets the hots for him. And here's where you know that he's learned his lesson, that it's not about his life. Not my place to take advantage of that, because it's not about me. And he stands for purity, and as a result, for his purity, he gets popped into prison. So he goes from the pit to property to prison. I almost could go back to being a Baptist pastor because it's all alliterated, starting with P's. There we go. So just the moment he thinks it can't get any worse, it does. Have you ever said, I have hit rock bottom, then wake up the next day and realize it just got worse? It's like, it possibly can't do anything more terrible than this, and then the next day something worse happens. Here's the reality of life. Just deal with this. This is Revelation. If you don't think it can get worse, it will. Here's what I found out, especially when I coach business people. Rock bottom is when I decide I'm not going to go down any further. Rock bottom is a myth. It's a decision. I've hit rock bottom. It's like, I don't know where your rock bottom is. It's when you said, no more, I surrender. I just give up. God, not my will, but yours. Just take this. Show me what to do. I'm going to develop the grit. I'm going to develop what I need to develop. So he goes to prison. Now, what's the opportunity, if you're preparing for the palace, what's the opportunity in prison? See, as a slave, and you excel at what you do, you get promoted. You get to be over all the other slaves. And guess what all those other slaves have to do? They have to obey you. Is that true in prison? You're telling prisoners who are doing 30 to life what to do. They don't have to follow you. Listen, leadership in prison looks a whole lot differently than leadership in corporate America. Because those guys don't, listen, if you're telling Bubba, who's serving 30 to life, to do this, this, and this, listen, he doesn't have to do it, and chances are he was stronger than Joseph. So somehow Joseph learned skills in prison and gets favor in prison to learn leadership amongst a bunch of people who already don't like life, who already have committed crimes, and who don't have to follow him. It's one thing to lead people, and can I just say something real honest? You know what I think is the hardest, most challenging leadership position in all the United States is? And I've been in some very big, powerful boardrooms. I've been with regional directors of worldwide real estate movements. I have consulted with some top business leaders in the nation. You know what I think the toughest leadership role in all the United States is? Pastoring a local church. How many people go to every day? Okay, so here's what he's got to do. This is what Mark and Cheryl have to do. They have to lead 300 independent contractors who all think that they understand church better than he does, and he has to lead them, and he's going out to transform the world with a volunteer army of people who may not think that he knows best all the time. And when they get mad at him because he preaches a sermon, or he doesn't promote them, or he doesn't do the right song, or he doesn't do the right thing, or he didn't say hi to them in the hallways, they get mad at him. They say all sorts of nasty things as they leave and go to other churches talking badly about the pastor. That's a pastor's job. I'm telling you, you don't want that. I did that for 20 years. Dude, yeah, I don't feel sorry for him. I mean, God's anointed him. He's amazing, and him and Cheryl do an amazing job. I'm just telling you, that's an amazing task of leadership, to transform the world with a volunteer army of people. It really is. Hey, listen, it shouldn't be October is Pastor Appreciation Month. Every month should be Pastor Appreciation Month. At least it should be Pastor's Wife's Appreciation Month, right? Here's the deal. When God has called you to the palace, see, Joseph was going to be put into a position at some point. Seriously, he was going to be put in a position where people would have to follow him. Where's the better place to learn leadership? When people have to follow you, or where you have to learn how to genuinely influence them? See, God's got you in a process. He had Joseph in a process. Do you think God made any mistakes in this process? Not one. Do you think God makes mistakes in your life? You are exactly where God wants you. And here's what I found out. Joseph learned how to steward wisely his current reality so that he could obtain his eventual destiny. Here's what God's inviting you to do. Wherever you are in life, be there. Steward. You know why I love this church? It's not about Sunday Christianity. It's about everyday Christianity. Wherever you are, be there. If you are prophesying, be there. If you are shopping, be there, because God knows that that is the closest thing to purgatory I'm ever going to get. It's just like that's, Danielle takes me everywhere shopping with her, right? It's awful. And it's like, God, you've saved me from this. Okay, I'll go be a light. Wherever you are, be there. If you are at work in a board meeting, be there. If you're a receptionist at a desk, be there. If you're an assistant, be there. Wherever you are, be there and make this decision. Wherever I am, I'm going to excel in that sphere, in that moment. So where are you right now? Okay, this isn't a hard question. Where are you right now? You're at Everyday Church. So can I make a suggestion? Be here receiving every bit of revelation you can, because you're not going to get this moment back. In about an hour, we're going to be talking about this moment. Some of you are going to say, man, that was amazing. Some of you are going to say, gosh, that was the most boring thing I've ever heard. Some of you are going to say, Mark, bring him back. Some of you are saying, God, please keep him in Kansas. It doesn't make a difference. You're just going to be talking about now some other point in time. So while you are here, be here with all that you have, with all of your might, because this is the day, and I love Mark's word, where God is rousing the mighty men of God, because it is a season of fulfillment of promises that have been prophesied over you for years. It is a season when the church comes into being the genuine apostolic light into the world, where we quit taking water to the ocean and we start taking water to the dry land that's out there. Does that make sense? So as he's in this prison situation, one day he overhears a couple that sparks on the next part of the process for me. He hears two men talking about dreams they have the night before. Do you think that might have been a trigger for Joseph? God, you promised me the sun and the moon would bow down to me. You promised me that these shocks of wheat, and here I am in an Egyptian prison, overhearing a butler and a baker talk about their dreams. He enters into what I call prophetic contradiction. It was a 3-syllable word. I have a hard time with those. Prophetic contradiction, where it's just the opposite happening in his life. There is a scripture in Thessalonians that says, do not despise prophecies. Have you ever questioned about that? How many of you love to get prophecies? Let me see your hands. Some of you are prophetic junkies. Like, if there's a prophetic line, it's like, oh, please, 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 me. It's like when prophetic voices come through, it's like, oh, please, God, I'm going to do my hair up really big so maybe they see me in the back, or wear the bright clothing. So it's me back here. It's like, please call me out. Me. I like the prophecy. Right? We love that. And sometimes we don't understand, how can we start to despise the prophetic? This is how you despise the prophetic. It doesn't happen. Something that you hoped for and it didn't happen, hope deferred makes the heart. And then we start hearing the prophetic words under a lens of scarcity and under a lens of an orphan spirit. And we start to see the prophetic like, oh, God, you said that, but it didn't happen. I want to trade my prophecies in. That prophet was just off. And we stop fighting for the prophetic word over our lives. And then the next time a prophet comes and says, well, he called me out last time, it didn't happen. Right? We begin to despise prophecies. You know what? Joseph had that opportunity right here, didn't he? I have a dream. Do you think that triggered everything within Joseph? I guarantee you that triggered everything. This is, by the way, this is probably 15 to 20 years later. And here's what the divine contradiction is. He goes and he says, okay, Mr. Butler, your dream means that you're going to get restored. Mr. Baker, sorry, dude, you're dead. Both prophecies go from prophecy uttered to prophecy fulfilled within a matter of days. God, what about me? I just articulately and accurately interpreted their dreams. And it happened in almost a nanosecond. What in the world, God, are you doing? Does that prayer sound familiar to anyone? God calls you to make millions and you go broke the next day. God calls you to prosperity and nothing you touches works. God calls you to a place of authority and everybody that you pray for gets sicker. Have you been there? I remember when God called me to the healing ministry. I prayed for people and they got sicker and the word got out. If you get sick, keep Lucas's hands off of you because you're going to get worse. Like, God, what are you doing? But by this point, he's learned what? To be free from the fear of man. To learn that he's just a servant. It's not about him anyway. He's learned leadership, how to genuinely influence people. And I bet you in those moments, he's like, God, you said it. I believe it. When is it going to happen? I'm going to keep my heart faithful to that moment, because on top of all this, the butler who says, hey, I'll remember you. I'll remember you. I remember. How does he forget him? He goes to Pharaoh and gets restored and doesn't remember Joseph back in prison. Because here's the reality. Sometimes you're ready for your palace just isn't ready for you. Get this. Behind the scenes right now, God is orchestrating events, creating divine connections, and providing resources that are not yet ready for you to step into your destiny. He is working miracles as I speak, waiting for you to be done with your process, because the moment is going to come in time when God says, okay, let's go do this. This is how it works with God. It happens gradually, and then it happens suddenly. Can I just tell you what happened with me? I'm a new team leader at Keller Williams, going through all sorts of personal issues, coming off of a platform ministry, wondering what in the world am I doing in real estate. And I get called to Austin, Texas, which is the home of Keller Williams International. And I'm sitting in a boardroom with a guy that's a multimillionaire, another guy that owns a big real estate company, a guy named is the editor of the top foremost real estate magazine, the CEO of Keller Williams and the president of Keller Williams International. We're in a meeting, and I'm sitting, and it's just me. It's like, oh my gosh, what am I doing in this room? They're discussing this high-level conversation, and they stop the conversation. The CEO says, hey, Lucas, what do you think? Gradually, then suddenly, all of a sudden, doors opened. Credit card debts gone. What do you need? Favor. Favor is more precious than gold, because when you have favor, you have access to all the gold you want. Joseph then gets in front of Pharaoh, who has a dream one night. The butler says, this guy might be able to interpret your dream. Now he's prepared. It's not about him anymore. It's not about his dream. It's not about his word. It's about him saving millions of people from famine. Guys, listen, God is preparing this church like that. You may be in a season of divine contradiction. You may be like Moses, where God says, go tell Pharaoh, let my people go. And while you're telling Pharaoh, let my people go, I personally, God, am going to go behind the scenes, whisper in his ears, don't do it. Just to make it fun. Your point isn't to get Israel out of Egypt. Your point is just to go to Pharaoh and say, let my people go. It's not about you. You're just a servant. I do what I'm told. Does that make sense? I know how to operate with favor. I believe in this room, and this is what I believe the Lord told me, that there are people in here that God is calling to be millionaires. That God is going to give extreme favor in the business world. That God is going to give you exceptional favor to prophesy to people who don't know that they're being prophesied over. I believe that in this room, in fact, I prophesied this over Mark. I believe in the Central Coast of California that God is going to reverse at some point in time when somebody catches the vision of this. God is going to reverse the fact that when I go for business coaching, I don't come to the church. I pay tens of thousands of dollars to other companies to coach me in the business world. I believe the Central Coast of California has an invitation to be the resource for a world that desperately needs the wisdom of heaven and become the experts in running a profit and loss statement, be the experts in lead generation, be the experts in business management, that some Christian is going to stand up and say, listen, enough of the world having it, enough for Oprah having it, enough for this person having it, enough for that person having it. We're going to take that because that was supposed to be the churches that we never were supposed to acquiesce to the world. I believe that in this room that some of you have been prophesied to have ministries of healing, that some of you have been prophesied over that you're going to have prophetic ministries, that some of you are supposed to go in and restore marriages, some of you are supposed to go in and see people set free on the inside. I believe that some of you are still pregnant with promise, and God is saying now is your time to come out of the season of the prison, come out of the season of the pit. You've passed your test. Now it's time for you to fulfill the promises that are over your life. That's why I'm here. You've been faithful in the promise. Some of you are still in the process. Some of you are still in the process, and my challenge to you is excel where you are. Blossom where you're planted. Be a steward with what God has given to you. Live in this moment and see what God does with a wise steward in their now. That's everyday Christianity, isn't it?